right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Informed Dissent podcast. We are a news podcast that brings you dispatches from the gender culture wars. I'm Ben Appel. I'm here with Eliza Mondegreen, Lisa Sellen Davis, Corey Cohn, and Jamie Reed. Today, we're going to talk about the three more executive orders that Trump released this week that have to do with gender. Um, One or two of them more than the others, but than the other. I wanted to start though with talking a little bit about Jamie's adventures this week. Jamie was in Kansas and she testified in favor of a bill that's in the legislature right now that is in support of restricting puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for minors. So Jamie, tell us how that went.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, this was my second year going back to Kansas. I will say Kansas is super close to my heart. We share a border with Missouri, and when Missouri passed the restrictions here, one of the things that I do know happened is that there was a hospital right on the border, and so kids were just merely
Mhm.
continuing on these same treatments, interventions directly on the other side. So I feel like this is part of my home region. Um, Traveled to Kansas, testified in person with Chloe Cole, and we are very confident that this bill is going to pass. But we're going to see slightly similar to Ohio. There's a Democratic governor who's going to veto the bill, and we're going to have to wait and have the legislature override her veto. Um, she has three options once the bill gets to her. She can let it go into effect without her signature. She has 10 days. She can sign it or she can veto it. So we're basically going to see once it gets to her what she's going to choose to do.
Is the, can you tell us more about the bill? Is it one of those bills that criminalizes the doctors and makes them felons, or what's going on with this
Yeah, I
bill?
mean, yes, there's some of that element. I think what was really interesting from the other side who's testifying was that they were very much upset about some of the language around social transition. So there is language in this bill that basically addresses and talks about teachers and clinicians not being able to promote essentially gender as an ideology anymore or promote social transition as well. And that is what they had pivoted to in a lot of their oral testimony to be in opposition to. There was very little that they were discussing in public about the medical provisions,
Is
minus the
that
endocrinologist at the end.
is that typical to de-emphasize the medical procedures for minors?
No, I think that they recognized the writing on the wall that this bill is going to pass. And I think that they were maybe potentially trying to formulate a last-ditch effort to keep in some of this concept around social transition. But what I really struggle with is I don't think it helps anyone's mental health for us to shift the position from saying, you can't get this right now, but we're still going to treat you as
Mhm.
trans and lean into the identity and just basically tell you the day that you turn 18, you get all of the things that the mean Republicans kept away from you.
I think it does help.
Explain.
Well, the more time that young people are spending not transitioning, the less committed they are. So the more opportunities they have to desist.
Yes, I agree with that. But do you think it helps that they still go to the gender doctor and the gender doctor says, oh, we see you, you're really trans, we're just waiting for the day you turn 18?
Well, let's open that up a little bit.
Okay.
So are you talking about a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old?
So what I think in some of these states, what's happening is that the bans are put into place and the clinicians are told you can still provide the mental health care.
Mhm.
It's still the gender framework, and they're still
Correct.
saying in that mental health care, we see you as trans, we're reinforcing your pronouns, your social transition, and then they either help them get out of state or
Mhm.
they are just telling them we're just gonna keep you in this holding pattern until you're old enough. I
Yeah.
don't think that the clinicians are shifting into providing support to recognize one's sex category.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But I wonder how much the enchantment holds when you, like, for young people, 1 year is forever, and 2 years is like,
Two
double,
forevers.
two forevers. Yeah, it's double forever. So staying in this holding pattern for so long might just burn these kids out. I don't know if it does or not. I'm just wondering if that might be the case. And to your point, what your hypothesis makes perfect sense to me. I wonder if we have any information to validate it.
Well, we have. I remember when I first started looking into social transition, into the research, and there isn't very much, but at first I was struck by how contentious it was among gender clinicians, and that there were a few papers in the 2010s saying there's no consensus, we're concerned about it, it may worsen gender dysphoria at puberty, etc. This, I guess that was for younger kids. And they acknowledged all of these issues before it had been reframed as a human right to live in a thing called a gender, right? Where there's this thing, this noun of a gender, and then we have the desistance literature, in which on average 80% of kids desisted who were not socially transitioned. And then we have the one study of the socially transitioned kids who did not even necessarily have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, who hadn't all been transitioned under the guidance of gender clinicians, and the vast majority of them persisted, and a very high percentage of them medicalized.
But Lisa, you just, I think, brought up that huge difference. So in the 2010s, I think most parents were waiting to have a clinician tell them proceed or not with a social transition. And I think what I saw by 2018, 2019 is basically every single kid came to us already socially transitioned. I mean, the parents just completely do this outside of medical, and teachers do it. I mean, there were also teachers. There were so many teachers in Kansas basically saying, I'm the one who, socially transitions all my kids in their classroom, and I'm the only one that sees them for their authentic selves.
What are they worried about if their desire to socially transition children is impeded? What the clinicians, the parents, the teachers, what were they saying?
Still suicide. The endocrinologist who spoke from Mercy in Kansas City was still citing suicide narratives. A number of them were still citing suicide narratives. It was interesting. Another thing that had shifted in who they put forward to testify was there were no trans women. In years past, there had been trans women who, I don't know how to say that, non-passing trans women were testifying. They put forward all trans men. Again, I struggle with, being in person with a lot of these individuals. The trans men that they poured forward don't pass really either. But I mean, but there had been that shift.
Yeah, it's a different face.
Yeah. I do think, yeah, it's interesting that would be the shift. They did have a parent who had lost a child to suicide testify. I struggled with my own testimony in writing it because I really looked at two different things. I could speak to the Republicans who I felt like were already going to vote in favor of the bill, or I could speak to those in the room who hate me and I want to talk to them the most. And so I really wrote something to talk to them. And I gave the speech twice, and the second time I found myself really emotionally engaged to the point where I actually was just turned around and talking directly to them. Because they bring kids. There are kids in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't save them though.
Can I speak to them? Do they hear anything that I say in that room?
Maybe. Maybe. I'm not
Kind of.
trying to like be a dark cloud or anything. When I say that you can't save them, what I mean is you can give them your thoughts, but your thoughts are not going to be the activating or motivating factor in changing them or fixing them. All I'm saying is you have to recognize the limit of your power to, like, because I hear what you're saying and I feel what you're saying, because you're right in the same space as them, and I know that you know or believe that if you could sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with these young people and say, let me download everything I understand and make sure that you get what I get, I am sure this will change your mind. I totally feel that.
I know.
But you're dealing with people who have been inculcated with a set of beliefs that you are a genocidal, hateful Republican bigot, and it's going to take, you're planting seeds basically. The best that you can hope for is that the seed finds some fertile ground and starts to grow. But a lot of this ground, unfortunate double entendre now, a lot of this ground is not going to be fertile.
There's one other thing that happened in Kansas, and then we can pivot to the executive order. So I show up in my Lyft from the hotel. Lovely lesbian Lyft driver. We had a little bit of a nice conversation. As soon as I pull up, there's a prayer circle in front of the Capitol. And they're all these ministers in these, like, what are the things that go over the minister's shoulders?
The alb.
Yes, they're rainbow and trans flag, like these things, and they're in this giant prayer circle. I get out of the car and I could not help myself. I was just like, oh my God, it's a trans prayer circle. And they all looked at me and they're like, who is this person? They had changed the words to This Little Light of Mine. They were singing about the trans children being like the light of the world. And I was just.
Well, they were singing about let these children access medical changes so that they can live their truth, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
There's so much to unpack there. That little light of mine rewording happened at a New York school meeting. I think it was this. Lisa, did you see this? A CEC District 2 meeting or a school board meeting? I think it was just CEC.
The same one that is the school board. Yeah.
Okay, right. And they led the whole crew, and it was interesting. That was the second time that I heard something like that. But Corey has written about and wrote a piece for Queer Majority that I'm guest editing and that should be coming out soon about gender ideology in churches. And that's something that I really it's really overwhelming how the churches how that's happened.
Let's do a whole episode on that, because there are some incredible, maybe we'll do it right after Corey's piece comes out, because there are some incredible,
assuming nothing else happens in the news, which hasn't been happening lately.
Well, I don't know when the piece is coming out, but the evolution of, God made a mistake to God made me this way, so God loves trans people, to God is trans, and therefore all trans people are God. There's it's just incredible to look at, and there are some fantastic clips. And This Little Light of Mine, they're doing it as a singing a spiritual, right? I mean, singing a hymn in the Church of Gender.
Well, you know that God created the gender surgeon to cut his breasts off.
Wow. Oh, because because Ariana Grande did tell us that God is a woman. So I guess it's God was a woman.
Right. Oh, that was, you know what? That is the remix that I need to steal. Thank you. So,
God was a woman.
I believe God was a woman and is now trans.
but see, that should make everybody happy.
Yeah, that's probably the solution.
Yeah.
All right.
You fixed
Well,
it.
Jamie, I have to commend you because when I was watching the video of your testimony, and people should go and see it, and it will be in the newsletter for paid subscribers, but seeing that wall of people behind you and I know so many of them are not
Yeah.
thrilled with the things that are coming out of your mouth. I just really don't know if I would be able to do that.
There
So
was
I commend you
only
for that.
5 of us in the whole room.
And it's a shame that it's come to this. Lisa, you wrote so well this morning about the executive order in terms of you comparing it to you yelling at your kids
Yes.
for them to clean up the house. Can you describe what you were writing there just real quickly? And this was in
Yeah.
regards to I guess the whole slate of executive orders, really. Maybe you were talking specifically about the gender affirming care, but it can be applied to the one that came out on the day that he was inaugurated as well.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that there's a wall of people surrounding Jamie in opposition is because the media has communicated to them that these orders, that these laws, these bans, etc., are rooted in hate and bigotry, and everyone is so focused on the intention and the logical fallacy of of judging the content by the assumed intention of the creator of whatever it is you're looking at. And it's really a bummer because the media is still doing it, and so everything is still, all of these things are being looked at as bigoted and transphobic and mean-spirited, and I see them as a response to left-wing overreach. And the way I understand it is, and I compared it to what happens. I mean, every day but for instance, this morning, when I say to my daughter, it's 7:45 and you have to go to school. And then I come back 7 minutes later and she's just like looking at her phone and listening to music and trying on the 7th shirt. And I say, now you're getting really close to being late. And anyway, it goes back and forth, and I make an argument about why it's important to be on time and the school attendance records, right? I'm trying all ethos, pathos, logos, etc. And then she has 20 minutes to get to school. It takes 45 minutes. And I just go, go to school. This is fun. And then she goes, okay, why you have to be such a about it? And that is basically the story of the executive orders. At least the ones on sex and gender. The bombarding, there's so much wrong with this, the way they're going about things. It would have been so great to have a moderate Republican and to actually say, like, let's have some, let's really try to govern, and let's really try to make decisions and listen to multiple stakeholders. This is not my preferred method. Okay, I'll say this and then I'll wrap it up. And when Jamie was talking, this just keeps coming up about stopping versus ending. Mm-hmm. So you can stop, you can cut off the supply, but ending it would mean more people understanding why it needs to end and assenting to it. And that would be dealing with the creation of the demand, which social transition is part of creating demand.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Well, Well, everybody check out Elisa's piece because it's very, very good. Okay, so let's talk about the executive orders. And Lisa, I guess I'm going to start with you guys and throw it out there, but I think we should start with the gender affirming care one, quote unquote, gender affirming care, sex trait modification, pediatric sex trait modification. I think we should start with that because that was a big one. It wasn't the first one that released, but it's obviously pertains to what we all talk about a lot. Um, Lisa, do you want to just kind of go over that and say what it is and what's going on?
Yes, although anyone who wants to jump in, but it basically said you don't do it anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
It said if you're getting federal funding, you cannot perform these procedures.
Right. It puts a lot of the onus on, I mean, obviously this makes perfect sense, but thinking about, looking at RFK Jr.'s confirmation hearings and then seeing throughout this, like the Secretary of Health and Human Services must, the Secretary of Health, and I'm thinking like of RFK in this position, and I'm just like, wow, this is just so bizarre. We go from Rachel Levine to possibly
Right. Well, and we go from Rachel Levine and the trans woman who was part of what really should have been a giant scandal in terms of being part of the group along with the American Academy of Pediatrics of pressuring the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, or WPATH, which creates quote unquote standards of care, pressuring them to remove age limits for interventions. And that didn't unseat Rachel Levine amazingly, but we went from that to this, which expressly forbids WPATH from being recognized as the standards of care.
It's a complete about face.
Biden didn't preemptively pardon Levine, right?
No.
I don't think no.
Okay.
What a bigot.
What do you guys think about the focus on dislodging WPATH's hold and then demanding the creation of let's see, use all available methods to increase the quality of data to guide practices for improving the health of minors with gender dysphoria, rapid onset gender dysphoria, or other identity-based confusion, or who otherwise seek chemical or surgical mutilation.
I will say that I messaged Lisa Littman and said, you've made it into a executive order. I was very excited for her for that.
Was she excited?
She quickly told me I did not have anything to do with writing this. I thought it was a great response. I didn't write it.
There's something that I think our side, whatever side that is, needs to be just a little bit careful about. The third section is titled Ending Reliance on Junk Science. And we probably believe that a lot of the science around this is junk science. But in this executive order, it just says, do you mind if I read this section here?
You read it.
Please.
So section 3, ending reliance on junk science. A, the blatant harm done to children by chemical and surgical mutilation cloaks itself in medical necessity, spurred by guidance from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, which lacks scientific integrity. In light of the scientific concerns with the WPATH guidance, blah, 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 blah. I think a case can be made for this, but I have maybe some concerns from a policy mindset of not taking the time to make your case and just declaring the people who I disagree with, that's junk science. So when I look at these types of orders, what I wish would happen is that instead of saying WPATH is junk science, what I wish this had been framed as is in accordance with emerging studies that show that there is no benefit to the, so put it in terms of what evidence supports your view instead of into terms of why your opponents are wrong.
Yeah, it does
Because
have a
I
certain
think
fake news ring to it.
yes, it does. I think you make a stronger case when you cite the evidence that supports you instead of just claiming that your opponents are wrong. That's just a
Yeah,
viewpoint.
I think that's important. And hopefully, I don't know, in 3 months, RFK or whoever ends up taking over HHS, but probably RFK Jr. will need to turn around what is going to have to be like a review of reviews of evidence, right? And then hopefully there will be this kind of stronger basis. But it's interesting that since that executive order has come out, there were several different ways in which it puts pressure on clinics and hospitals that are currently providing these interventions to youth. Some of them were kind of, okay, if you're receiving like research and federal grants, we're concerned about that. And then talking about like wanting to expand the ability for patients to sue doctors and wanting to ramp up scrutiny and investigations of these like hospitals and clinical practices. And so in just those few days, we've seen several hospitals already announce that they are pulling out, which is encouraging. Although, of course, online it's being described as complying in advance with, fascism.
Right. What is it? Colorado's Denver Health.
Colorado, DC,
The-
somebody in
Virginia?
Children's National, and then Virginia Commonwealth,
Yes.
VCU Health and
Yeah.
Children's Hospital of Richmond. I think one of those it has just paused surgeries, I
Denver.
believe.
one of them was just surgeries. And there are
Right.
several more that are being mentioned online that they're canceling appointments, but they haven't made statements.
Right.
hmm
Well, it's kind of like it reminds me of what happened in Missouri, right, Jamie? I mean, wasn't there like a grandfather clause and like, kids can still be treated. You don't have to close the clinic. You just can't take on new, and they just closed everything down.
Well, they extended the private right of action. And so
Okay.
you gave
Right.
individuals the right to actually sue for the harms in a long-term period. They were like risk
And then
management.
they were like, wait a minute.
Wait a
So
minute, we
nobody
actually
nobody
cannot be-
regrets it,
right.
but we should probably stop.
Right.
That's what it
We can't
was.
be responsible for the long-term outcomes of this. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Interestingly, okay, so of the kind of news coming out that these hospitals are closing though, or stopping their programs, there's two things that came to mind. First of all, I still see that we have lost something when we have had blue sky and all these people jump over. I think we've lost a little bit of that back and forth that we would have seen on Twitter maybe 3 months ago. Aaron Reed isn't on there anymore, Assigned Media. Like we've lost a couple of the bigger accounts that would have had this back and forth dialogue. And so what
Well,
we're seeing over on X, go ahead, Corey.
it was never a back and forth dialogue.
Well,
Right.
I mean, I was not blocked by, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, all right, fair.
There were people shouting from two sides of the same river, and now it's different rivers.
Right.
Correct. And so we're not
Okay.
I'm not seeing the blue sky, what's going on over in blue sky. And so I do think that we've lost a little bit of that town square because,
Yeah.
we lost the yelling. But what I have seen from what Aaron Reed has been putting out, I found really interesting because we go back to these concepts. Is Aaron Reed or Evan Urquhart, or however you say her name, journalists? Because it looked like one of those hospitals was actually giving Aaron Reed comments.
Mhm.
And then Aaron's reply to them was, this is a really bad statement and you're hurting people. And I'm like, how many journalists go back to their source and tell them your statement is evil? I mean,
A lot.
okay.
These days, a lot.
There's not, I think journalism is mostly dead.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
I mean, good God.
But I do, I said this in a group chat earlier this morning, but I wonder how many hospitals will shut this down and have been wanting to. How many people wanted an exit ramp, but didn't have the guts or the support or whatever they had. And now they have an excuse, and the
Mhm.
excuse is evil Donald Trump.
Mhm.
Right.
And
We looked at our risk management profile and we didn't like it.
yeah, but he couldn't do it because of the optics. And now it's they can blame Trump and they don't have to take responsibility for it, and they can be victims instead of heretics.
My guess would be like 50-50 or maybe 60-40 of the staff that work at these places are relieved that this is gone down. 60-40, I think. That's my guess. But
What do you think,
Not in the
Jen?
gender center. Those staff are like scrambling, but
No, but in the hospital system.
hospital system, oh yeah.
yeah, I mean like all of the nurses that help in like, with in the OR and in all of that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Now, see, and what could have happened was if this hadn't come out, I mean, I think that the ruling in the Scrimeti case that's supposed to come out this spring, that would have also set a big precedent and perhaps been the excuse that people could use to say, okay, we can't do this anymore, because most likely the SCOTUS is going to side with Tennessee and allow that ban to stand, which doesn't necessarily mean that all the bans go into effect, but it does essentially say that this red states or blue states, but red states who have created these bans, that this can go forward, and that there's not really any legal recourse that people can take.
Can I just throw out though, I still don't want we are not at we're not at Berlin. So a friend of mine said this executive order was like D-Day. We actually took
gosh.
the beach.
It's like D-Day.
Yeah, we've taken the beach. We still have to march all the way to Berlin.
Huh?
I'm
They're
not really in
Nazis.
favor of anybody using Nazi analogies.
We
Just
are
to be completely clear.
we are the ones that
I think it's just a World War II analogy.
Are we
No, I know, but
Okay,
in my
fine.
What
analogy,
happened? What about well, no, we can't say World War One either. How
But-
about no, we can't say no. Okay.
But that would
okay,
make that would make our opponents Nazis. My opponents are not Nazis. You know who my opponent is?
that's what I'm saying.
My opponent is a woman who works at a gender clinic, and she sees all of these kids coming in, and she thinks that something is highly wrong, and she's afraid to say anything. And even though she came in supporting it, over time she's realized that it's not right. And we need to support those people, changing their minds and giving them all of the support they could possibly need, because these people are not the Nazi enemies, they're our future allies. And I've always said that.
I completely agree. Let me try to explain what I was trying to say without using Nazis. I'm so sorry. Forget the Nazis. Okay. So pretend like in St. Louis here, Missouri didn't already have a ban, and instead we just had this federal EO. The university hospitals would do exactly what these other ones are doing. They're going to shut down their centers because they rely on federal funding and grant money to a huge part of their budget, so they would shut down. But when I actually looked at some of the insurance data for St. Louis, and I thought I knew who all the gender doctors were in town, one of the biggest billers was actually a more homeopathic DO in a suburb who was
A
opposed
DO?
to vaccines,
They're osteopaths.
osteopath. An osteopath. Who had huge billing numbers for trans kids in their private practice. I'd never heard of this person. So what is going to happen in a lot of these blue states is the big multidisciplinary centers are going to close because they're attached to universities. And what will be left is these one-off, probably not even endocrinologists, probably general practitioners who are very ideologically driven, who are willing to sometimes even prescribe outside of even WPATH guidelines. I've seen some of these one-offs who are willing to prescribe to kids without a single therapist visit, without even a therapist letter, without even making sure that they're getting consent from legal guardians. We're still going to see that in some of these blue states. which is why I still go back to we need either we still need state by state laws. And then we actually need investigations and checks and making sure that they're not prescribing and making sure that they're not changing codes.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
my D-Day.
And we need even more whistleblowers.
Hmm.
But
Which was also part of the executive order to,
Hmm.
yeah, enhance whistleblower protection.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Ben, I know you were writing about this. Can you talk a little bit about what this might mean for Planned Parenthood, one of our biggest, let's say, providers of gender affirming care?
Yeah, I mean, that was a question I certainly had because, well, and talking about Planned Parenthood, talking about like what it means on the state level. I mean, I think
Mhm.
we all know what it means on the state level, that it doesn't affect that, but we can see what's happening. So with certain hospitals that are already kind of pausing this at least, or shutting it down and kind of waiting to see what happens. And then of course there are going to be states that double down, like probably Oregon, I would say, maybe Washington, I don't know. Um, but with Planned Parenthood, a major provider of these services, I learned that over 40% of Planned Parenthood revenue comes from government reimbursement and grants. So that's what, according to these sources that I looked at, over 40%. So um, if 40% of their revenue is coming from the government, and now the government is saying we're not going to fund this, then
Mhm.
it looks like they're going to be under the gun um, to end providing this if they want to continue to be funded in the way that they are, right?
yeah, because cross-sex hormones are a much smaller percentage of their business. So if they got to choose, they're not going to choose cross-sex hormones.
Right. But do we know that? Like I wonder what
Yeah.
percentage of it is, in terms of, I mean, they prescribe cross-sex
It's
hormones. Do they prescribe puberty blockers?
Very
No.
rarely. They
yeah, it
have
wasn't
a
being granted.
protocol for it, but they very rarely do so. They're primarily cross-sex hormone provider.
Okay.
And that's not big business, and it's not a huge part of their business. So I can't remember. We can link to it in the show notes, but uh, I recall it
Friend of the pod, Jennifer Black, did some investigation on this.
What did she say?
She's probably listening. She wrote a great piece for the Free Press about how Planned Parenthood got into the business of gender affirming care, and then some detransitioners, and they've done very strange things. Like they had that cute little animation saying, if you feel uncomfortable in your body, you might be transgender and need puberty blockers. I mean, that is a very strange animated video to show children, because
That wait, Planned Parenthood said it had something to do with that?
yeah, that was a Planned Parenthood video, as I recall.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the one that was kind of recently circulating
No, I don't
online
know. It was a
again.
couple of years ago that it.
There was an organization I think called Amaze that had produced that, I believe, if I'm right. This just
We'll
happened
find
like
out.
3 days ago, I believe. Colin Wright was circulating it, talking about kind of
Oh,
like a recruitment video.
we're talking about two different videos, but yes, Ben,
Oh, it's like the same script then.
it is all, yeah, it's very similar script. But
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it's so strange to pathologize. Okay, I was hearing my sentence before it came out, to pathologize normal human experience and then prescribe medication for it, but that is most of, that is most of modern life.
Maybe with RFK, maybe it won't be. I'm like, am I still going to be able to get my antidepressants?
No.
Will the Fruit Loop still have the red one?
Uh-huh. Well, maybe they'll use real, I don't know, strawberry,
Beet juice.
whatever. I
It'll
don't,
be
right, beet juice, beet
guy
juice,
now.
beet juice for real.
Yeah.
But he did say in his hearing that that what is happening to kids, and I think he cited the CAST review or a UK study, I believe he said in his reasoning, that what happens to kids is catastrophic or used a word like that when he was asked whether he would continue or stand behind these practices, and he said that. Um, so that's good. I mean, he's read
So
the
that
cast
sounds like a
review
no.
apparently. Well, yeah, and it's good that he's using this
Yeah.
this evidence.
It's good, but going back to what Corey said about the how we need to turn our enemies into our allies, and what I was saying about ending versus stopping, we have an executive orders that use junk science instead of WPATH is not based on systematic reviews, and we have RFK Jr. who look, some of the ideas are good and some of them are totally bananas.
Mhm.
And maybe that's, maybe that's true with everybody and we just aren't that tuned into it, you know?
Yeah.
But
Although,
it,
we just had Richard Levine turning HHS into
Mhm.
the most effective lobby organization for child sex changes. That's crazier than probably anything that RFK Jr. is going to come up with.
Mhm.
But
did he do anything good, Mr. Mix Levine, Mr.
did he
Mix?
do anything good?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
I,
my God, maybe. But
yeah,
I'll
we
be
don't know.
honest. I'm so horrified by what he's done to these children that it's completely colored my ability to appraise anything positive he might have done. But
Mhm.
Okay, so
it's hard to assume that any person's wholly evil, but it's just easier for me to think about him that way.
but that's
Mhm.
exactly what, when I walk out the door, every single person I run into feels about Trump. Or
Wow.
I get, yeah, like
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if maybe these executive orders on sex and gender are kind of okay, even though they, of course, don't think that around here.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
all the other stuff is so terrible that it doesn't matter.
Wow. Do I have Levine derangement syndrome?
No, I don't think so, Corey, but I don't know. I don't think I agree with your, this kind of idea that someone's wholly evil or that,
Oh, I don't.
and I don't
No,
think
he
you
doesn't.
actually, yeah, but were you joking? Because I don't think you actually think that, right?
No, no, no. I just didn't explain myself very clearly.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that in my mind, that's all. That's the only. Like I have a distorted view of Richard Levine. That's what I'm saying. Is that it's not really likely that any person is wholly evil. I mean, even Hitler liked vegetables,
Hmm.
but Richard Levine probably also likes vegetables.
Hmm.
I don't know.
I wonder
He
if
doesn't look like he likes them that
I
much.
wonder if Levine did anything to help to improve access.
Likes canned corn.
Sorry.
I wonder if I wonder if Levine did anything good to improve access for maybe HIV related care, prevention,
Oh,
AIDS
maybe.
related prevention. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe.
System
Um,
was really well built up. I mean, the Ryan White system's been really well built for years now.
I mean,
All
I
Rachel
don't know.
Levine needed to do is just not run it into the wall and
Mhm.
it would have been still functioning well.
Hmm.
Also, I'm really interested in this dialogue because I'm hearing that we're using different names and but I don't think pronouns.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Right.
Okay.
I still don't know where I land on pronouns, to be honest. I'm agnostic. I struggle.
So you're all about the they and them?
That's it. No,
Mm.
no, actually, I can't stand the they
I
and
draw
them,
the
but
line there. But
yeah, I definitely draw the line there. I do not use those pronouns, but in terms of correctly sexing versus, you know,
It,
Yeah.
Lisa, and even Ben, I think it's really interesting when you just said you draw the line there because what actually happened in the hospital system was when the nurse and I went in and trained the emergency room workers. at 2018,
Train them on what?
2019 on trans. I mean, of course, I was a trans
Okay.
propagandist. So I went off and trained all the divisions on trans, which is really interesting because, like I said, in Kansas, the ear, nose, and throat division doesn't go around and propagate about, yeah, okay. Just to put that in perspective. But when we train the ER physicians 18, 19, and we're just saying, hey, can you use she, her, hers, and he, him, his, nobody had an issue. The nurses, the ER techs, everybody fine. When we went back in 2022, the nurses were in complete disarray and anger because at that point they had been seeing patient after patient after patient who was asking for they them pronouns and neo pronouns. And when those neo pronouns hit the emergency room, that is when the nurses and the frontline staff said, nope, we're not doing this anymore. We are not calling patients it. We are not calling patients mushroom. We are not calling patients these pronouns. This is absolutely batshit crazy. We're not doing it. And the they, them too, they were like, we're not doing this. And that is where there is a tiny element of Brianna Wu that is correct. They lost the public. They lost the nursing staff when that started happening.
Mushroom is why we can't have nice things. Yeah.
I think it was really the one that
Yeah,
really upset people.
That's
like,
really
I'm not
hard to take.
dehumanizing my patient.
Well, I mean, I
And
think
you
that
don't want
ties.
me to, like, right? Like, if you're a patient, do you want to be dehumanized by your doc? Not personally. Sorry.
No, it's true, but um, that the neo pronouns and everything and all this wouldn't if it hadn't started with indoctrinating kids, with trying to transition kids. I mean, not to be like all, oh, they came for the kids, but I just think that we would be in a different landscape if there wasn't this push to go into schools and teach kids things like this total pseudoscience, and which this is the inevitable result of that. When you put this in a kid's mind, they're going to be mushroom and rainbow and it. And when they're made to believe that sex is immaterial, and then transitioning kids and having it be this huge thing. I think that that was a huge mistake. And I was thinking recently, like, well, what would that mean for women? Because for a long time, women and feminists in particular have been quietly, for the most part, are kind of on the sidelines, uh, because they haven't been getting coverage, fighting back against, the slow encroachment upon their spaces by trans-identified males. And a lot of them have had problems with it. This has gone back for a long time. It's happened with lesbians and so on. I think that that would still be kind of in a dark corner. Not a dark corner, but I just don't think there would have been as much movement there if there hadn't been this move to get the kids in on it. What do you guys think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think people are in general very tolerant of adults having all kinds of unusual beliefs and doing all kinds of unusual things, and they think, I don't want to pay for it. Maybe I kind of want you to keep it at home, but I can probably live with it, but leave kids alone. Like
Hmm.
that's how it seems to me.
Corey, can I ask you a question along the same vein though here?
Yeah.
Did the they, them, and the neo pronouns, is that a kid invention?
It's I think from Tumblr,
But
or at least it caught fire on Tumblr.
is it because it went into kids that kids, like, I think, Ben, you were kind of saying that when you brought it to kids, kids are the goofballs that came up with this stupidity. Like, is that how that played out?
Well, what I was saying is that Lisa, go if you want to have something if you have an answer for
Do you
that.
know, Lisa?
I think it came from kids and was affirmed by therapists. So it came from this shift from treating gender dysphoria to affirming gender identity and the idea that kids know themselves. And so if you look at Diane Aronsaf's work, where she says, that kids give you gender signals, they pull at their onesie, they tear at their barrette, and then she has gender smoothies and gender parfaits.
Tootsie Roll Pops,
well,
Minotaurs.
She has this list in an official APA, book of
100%.
the gender blenders and it's all in the children's language, right? And so she's saying, Stella O'Malley talks about this from going from child-centered to child-led. This is a child-led movement. This is a child-led approach to psychology and medicine. And so, yes, those are, if you're a young child, before you arrive at sex constancy and you understand that your category is based on your body and not at all how much you conform or don't to stereotypes, and you're taught that she, her is for girls, and he, him is for boys, and you only know those categories based on stereotypes, and you don't fit either one, then maybe you'll want a pronoun or you'll want an identity outside that. So it's really upholding, celebrating a toddler's worldview. That's how I've always thought of this, because gender identity is a cognitive phase that gives way to a deeper cognitive phase later, but we are keeping everybody at the toddler phase. So this whole, and then they have tantrums, when we don't treat them or talk about them in the third person exactly the way they want to. I mean, it's very much keeping people from developing cognitively.
And then there's, I think that's a great point, Lisa. And I think with like kids are probably more likely to want to go towards non-binary, maybe, because like you said, if they're not fitting specifically into this category and it's more unique or kind of punk to identify as something else. The lightning speed with which medicalizing non-binary has become a thing. The lightning speed of non-binary to non-binary becoming a thing, to non-binary becoming a sex or a non-sex or having to do with material sex, to something to be medicalized, to something to be medicalized in kids is is so insane to me. And I see this video that came out recently of a woman maybe testifying, and I'm not really sure, but it was a mom, and she's non-binary, and she's talking about either her one or two trans kids, and one of them's non-binary, and it came out at 5 or 8. And kids are so scared of puberty, and they've been so relieved to know that puberty blockers are available to them because they're so scared of when that time comes. And so they can rest easy knowing that, well, at least they can block their puberty if they need to. And now without this, they're just going to be so distressed. And is it not, talk about like, I mean, are those, Corey, are those our future allies? Because to me, in my head, that person is my enemy. Not in terms of, oh, I think she's bad. I want to, I just think that person is the antithesis, is the anti-truth, anti-reality, and I have no idea how I could get to them and how we could have a conversation.
Well, the way I see it is that we just keep saying true things, and we hope that people will hear us, and that through listening to us and considering what we're saying, that they will come to change their minds.
But this makes me want to ask Eliza, who's been studying radicalization and knows a lot about it, because they don't, I mean, I don't know exactly how radicalization works, but so they don't know they've been radicalized because it happens.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that so that we can all understand?
Yeah. So I think you're right that people don't recognize that they've been radicalized. A lot of that is because so much of society has been radicalized. It's very hard when all of your points of reference also went over the waterfall at about the same time. But my what I've been thinking about a lot in the last week or so was, being in some ways really glad to see the executive orders come out. Really relieved to think like, okay, this is not the end of everything. This is stopping some things that really need to stop as soon as possible, and maybe we can pick up the pieces later. But my concern has been that these executive orders concern a group of people who have been really radicalized into some very, very strange beliefs about who they are, what their bodies need, what they need to stay alive, what makes life worth living, what kind of recognition they need from the government, and what kind of appropriate reactions there are if the government changes its tune and suddenly, divests from gender identity, which is what we're seeing. Because we have the situation where we have these big and confusing and really like highly, highly politicized changes, and the really irresponsible advocacy organizations who have spent years, reinforcing the worst fears of a lot of young people who they should have been supporting by not terrifying them, but a little too late for that. And then this population of radicalized young people. And I think the really important concept is from Steve Hassan's work in cults, which is phobia indoctrination. All high control groups have some version of phobia indoctrination. It is something that helps to keep people in, even when their questions and doubts might otherwise push them out. So it instills them with irrational fears about the outside world or what will happen if they leave the group. So, in Scientology, if you leave, you're unpersoned and your family will never talk to you again. And other cults have, you'll never, if you leave the cult, well, you're giving up on enlightenment, you'll never be fully realized. The trans version of that is very, very similar. The most optimistic case is, okay, you leave and then you're in denial about your gender identity and, just forever. And so you're suppressing who you really are for the rest of your life if you give this up. And there are a lot darker versions of that too, like that you'll commit suicide if you are suppressing your gender. Or you're also told that, people who have concerns, including, parents, loved ones who have, the most sincere concerns about your well-being, hate you, want to erase your existence. And right now we have the government doing things that these young people have been primed to react to in the strongest possible terms. The government isn't erasing the existence of transgender people, but the government is removing recognition of, a transgender identity on federal identification cards. It is really backing out of this pact that the federal government had made previously, which is like, we will recognize your identity and therefore it will exist, because it doesn't exist if it's not recognized, which is something that's so different from like, okay, I'm really female. I don't really need anybody else. But if I identified as something else, I would need other people to play along and I'd need the government to recognize it for it to be in any sense real. So I guess I've been thinking I would like a little bit more packaging, a little bit more thoughtfulness around the executive orders. Something like, I know Hillary Cass tried to do this, and I think went a little too far in terms of still holding on to some concepts.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. But she made a sincere effort to speak to young people and to say, I understand how you may feel as you're seeing this, review moving forward, and you feel like we're going to take away these things that are really important to you. And just trying to communicate, like, I understand how you're feeling. Here's exactly what we're doing. And, here's why. And trying to talk to them. Daniel Smith did this in Alberta too, when they pushed forward their provincial ban on kind of youth transition. And I think, I just think like it's not necessary, like it's really hard when the other side has politicized this for 10, 15 years to say, please, like we're begging you, like please don't politicize this. Like please, don't use the super loaded language. You don't have to call it mutilation. You can still describe what's happening and be really clear and not, leave anybody in any doubt about what's happening. Plain English is like damning enough. You don't have to use all of these words that are gonna like completely, for lack of a better word, trigger people. Because this is a moment when a lot of young people are like, they're going to be on this precipice where they can move deeper into radicalization. They can move deeper into the community as they feel more and more alienated by their government, by all of the other, people in the country who they think support something that they see as even in some cases like a genocidal movement against them. Or it's a moment where some of these young people can start to look at their own community and say, wow, this really isn't like, they're really trying to like terrify and misinform us. And maybe like it could create a little bit of a crack and a little bit of a way out for some of these young people. So I think it's really, really sensitive. And there are young people trying to fact check all the time. You see it in the online communities. They'll be trying to fact check like how, like all kinds of things from, do men ever feel like, do boys ever feel like they might want to be girls, but then they're not girls? Or, they'll try to fact check all kinds of things and it's completely tragic. But this is one of those instances where the thing they're trying to fact check exists out in the real world and is not just some crazy concept that has no possible right answer. And it would be great if they were actually looking at the executive order, if some of it was written toward them or with a thought for, their concerns, their needs, what they,
and their families.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that too. And, we can say, okay, teachers need to stop teaching this in schools. That's great. Teachers do need to stop teaching this in schools, but a lot of kids, this is already, they've already imbibed it. Like we have to work with like the population that we have as we try to roll this back. And it's something that I think has just never been done before, where we've had the government kind of recognize this pseudo rights movement and then have to say, actually, like we didn't think this through. Actually, this is impacting women's rights. We just can't do this. Like, actually, medical scandal. There's no playbook for mass de-radicalization. There's no playbook for rolling back that kind of investment by the government. And I really implore if anybody is working on this stuff who is listening to this podcast, which is very unlikely, like, please think about talking to these kids and think about unloading the language as much as you possibly can. And I'm not saying, and it was interesting, like when I was writing about this online, how many people were kind of equating my like, please be like compassionate and think about where these kids are with like, oh, well, you want us to like lie to them and pander to them and coddle them. And that's how we got into this position. It's like, I get why people feel that way. Like this has been such a frustrating time, but of course that's not what compassion requires. We would say, I think all of us would say that it requires the opposite of those things, which is honesty, but it means that you don't have to rub people's faces in something that they're already afraid of. Yeah. Anyway,
that's so beautifully put.
Totally.
That's so beautifully
How can
put.
we get Eliza to talk to the director at HRC and at GLAD and at Lambda Legal and the ACLU?
Because those organizations could step up too. Like,
they could be part of that playbook for mass de-radicalization.
Yeah. I suspect that they have opposition researchers like Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa. Watching stuff like this and making notes about it. Anyway, I'm sorry, I met Evan.
That's something people don't realize is that once you speak up, there are actually, I mean, it sounds so paranoid, but there are these kind of digital armies of people who watch us all and keep kind of dossiers on us and just to continue to besmirch our character.
Yep.
Which I never claimed to be a good person, so I
can vouch for you.
But what Eliza was saying so beautifully is more on that, speaking to these people as if they are our future allies and signaling to them that if you want to leave, you can come home to the land of the sane, right? When someone's in a cult, you don't just oh, you're in a cult. You like, I mean, I don't know.
I put the coffee on and I have cream and sugar and I have scones and come over and
even if you're holding on to some of it, we welcome you over here. And I think we do, most of us try to speak like that and communicate like that and not, but they're still because of the way they've been radicalized. Part of that radicalization is a kind of filter that transforms sentences like biological sex is real into you want a transgenocide, right? And
Right.
so but that doesn't mean that then we start saying we want I don't even want to finish that sentence. We still continue to speak this way, and it would have been helpful if the orders had adopted that tone. So clearly they were not aimed at transforming the people who are in the cult into allies. So,
Right. It wasn't aimed at building public understanding. It was like, okay, our side won, and so our side that thinks this is now going to impose our understanding the way that the other side that won before imposed their understanding on us. Like it was very mirror of what had happened
Trump's usually so
2 years ago.
nuanced too, and kind of humble. I was just surprised that was the.
I know it was so blunt, and it's just so
okay.
uncharacteristic.
Oh, point taken.
But what Jamie said earlier, something about, oh, I'm just disappointed that, there's now blue sky and X and people are more divided. I think that that's actually a huge crippling problem. And I think that social
Yeah.
media was already, I mean, social media, there are benefits to it. It has become a public square. It does give people a voice, but it was already, Eliza, you said there's a gentle way to say these things. Lisa, you said that. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, in my social media, I don't necessarily speak very gently. Like I speak gently when I'm speaking to people or talking to people, but there's a hardened side of me that comes out in that sphere because it's more, reactionary, I suppose, or emotionally driven. And so I think that feeds into it. But now that we're in our own echo chambers, you know, I look at Blue Sky and I look at Facebook, like where different friends are talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
the language that they're using and the way that they're speaking about this stuff is so alarming, in terms of what they're seeing as, like the beginning of a genocide, like the beginning of a fascist takeover, like the beginning of, I mean, there's obviously critiques to be made about authoritarianism and overreach and what this looks like and criticisms of Trump, absolutely. But to be existing in these two different spaces and then seeing it on X, I think it's huge. But for some reason, Eliza, when you were talking and you were talking about like de-radicalizing and like how to do this, it had me thinking about like in the government's approach and what the best way could be. It had me thinking about the war on drugs for some reason, because the war on drugs is such a futile, war, and there's so many different approaches to try to get people off of these drugs, away from these drugs, to stop using these drugs. And it's like, let's provide Narcan, let's provide clean needles, let's provide, no, let's say no, let's say complete abstinence, let's outlaw this, let's put these people in jail. No, we can't, we'd have to decriminalize. I mean, is this the new war on drugs?
I think it's really different because this is like this psychic contagion. And so I mean, I'm trying to think like of the right way to say it, but I think I'm a little tired.
Well, we've been going at
Oh
this
my
for
gosh.
over an hour,
No,
so
I'm trying
it's
to.
understandable.
I mean, does somebody else have something to jump in? Because, and I'll think.
I will just say, I think, Ben, you're right that there's a level that addicts, people who are addicts and feel like they require something, there is an element of how to walk people off.
Yeah.
Like de-radicalization and detox are not different, that different of concepts, right? That there are some people who are so radicalized that they will require a medicalized detox. And then there's some people, who dabble in, edibles who maybe can just, their parent can, I think that the parallel can be made, that we can detox and we can de-radicalize, and there's going to be different elements to it. But I also think you're right that the government can guide us in a scientifically evidence-based way, or they can put out an ad of an egg frying in a frying pan. I mean, like, you can have messaging that's, that has, what hits and what hits at young people. And I do think what Eliza taps into is that young people need messaging in such a way that this order didn't hit that.
Well,
Yeah,
they're
sorry,
not reading
Courtney.
this stuff anyway, though.
No.
Well,
And
I wouldn't.
let's be honest here. If the order had been written to be as sensitive as possible, Aaron Reed still would have put the worst intent
Oh, I
possible
know.
into it. So it's almost like who do you think would be reading this and would be open-minded, even if it was written in the, now I still think it had a lot of room for improvement, but young people aren't directly going out to so I guess a few are. So a few smart
I mean,
ones
I think
are.
that there is some fact-checking or attempted fact-checking going on, and
That's fair.
and that's being, described at least some places online, and they'll be quoting the exact language from the executive order, and it'll be reinforcing their worst fears. It's also completely true that we can't, ever write something that will make the lunatic fringe sane. But we need to go back to what we were talking about with, Corey, you and Jamie earlier in this conversation, where it's like you are planting a seed and maybe it will, blossom in the future. And a sane, compassionate, non-politicized, as clear as possible, as, not confusing as possible communication is a seed and an alternative way of looking at things for when someone is ready to do that.
This really reminds me, I had a conversation with Alex Capo. I don't know if I'm going to say his name. He runs the school. He was telling me that oftentimes they will get a new kid intake to them. Ben, are you familiar with the school that he runs?
No.
Okay.
What's this?
School in Burnt Hills, New York, near my hometown, for very, very mentally distressed
Young people.
teen
Got
girls.
Girls.
Teen girls.
Okay.
Girls, okay, got it.
So they'll get a new
A
intake.
therapeutic school for girls.
Okay.
So they'll get a new intake, they'll go to the hospital, that his staff will go meet at the hospital in normally the psych ward, and they will be intaking the new young person, and there will be the hospital staff there and his staff. And so we have two adults in the room. Both are trained in their own way. One is highly trained in the gender ideology. The other one understands that it's an ideology. And they will say to the young person, when you enter our program, we will call you your birth name and your birth sex. And the hospital staff is oftentimes, Alex says, the ones who lose it first. Oh my God, you can't do that. What are you talking about? Why are you here? How could you do this to the kid? And the kid is sitting there like, okay, there's a grown-up in the room laying down the parameters. I trust them. I'm gonna, because they, in the intake, they've already explained, we are going to take care of you. We are going to set the parameters. We are going to make sure that all of your needs are met. We're going to address you in this way, but we're not doing this. And I think part of what the grownups in the world need to do right now, sure, the executive order could have been rewritten in a different way, but the schools, the teachers, the hospitals, the HRC, the GLAD, the therapists need right now to embrace this as a moment where we're going to say to the young people, hey, you're going to be okay. We're not going to do this anymore, but we've got you covered. We're going to make sure you get your lunch today at school. You're going to make sure that you still have your books. The flag's going to come down. It's okay. The grownups have got this. And what I really just want all of us to embrace, the parents, all of us, is let's just be the grownups again and tell these kids, we've got it. You're going to be okay.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I get that. I think that's a good place to
Stop. Yeah.
wrap it up. Yeah, that was great. There's a lot to go over. I appreciate everybody listening, and you guys were awesome.
Wait, we have to do our recommendations.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Lisa. What do you got?
Because I just think it's what lots of things are making me happy right now. One is talking to you guys every week, which is a real life improvement.
And all week.
But I and always, but also but I have been just really trying to do more non-gender stuff. So that's why I feel like this is important part of our work. But anyway, mine today will be Matthew McConaughey's tuna salad.
Is that a movie or a recipe?
Hopefully it's both.
Or a euphemism.
Right?
Or
Oh.
a position. No, it's a recipe, and
Not gonna try it now.
and I don't know. We went to Alex and I went to a party and we brought. I was like, we're going to.
And you brought Matthew McConaughey's
We
tuna
brought
salad?
we brought Matthew McConaughey's tuna salad, and I thought it was very strange to bring tuna salad to a party, but it was so good, and it was a big hit. So I'll put a link to that.
Yeah, that would actually be good because that sounds good. What about you, Eliza?
I went to the opera this week for the first time since the pandemic. So that was very exciting. It was the Magic Flute. And I had the really cheap tickets where you literally stand in the back of the balcony and you stand on these risers behind the last seats
Wow.
for hours.
For
But it
the
was
whole
like
time.
for the whole time.
Oh,
But
sounds
especially because it was a
lovely.
comedy, it was just like super exhilarating. It was really
Oh,
fun.
good. An opera comedy.
We're 2 for 2. Corey's rejected 2 of our non-gender.
No, I just like it's just like standing up for
Yeah.
Tuna salad,
Tuna
standing up.
salad.
yeah.
Okay,
Corey?
Corey, what do you got?
So I don't know. I guess I have a broken brain. You know, it's really cool is there's a project called ProPublica, and they've got this thing called the Nonprofit Explorer.
Okay.
So this is just a little factoid that is I got to spend some more time on, but I'm giving you a heads up. So there's a group called the American Civil Liberties Union who used to post on X, but they don't anymore. And in 2021, their contributions were $227 million. And in 2022, their contributions were $213 million. That's down $14 million. And then in 2023, their contributions were $184 million. That's down 14, 16, that's down like $30 million. So I'm interested to see what their 2014 filings are going to be. But I think that
2024.
somebody is in trouble at the ACLU. if
Maybe
they're
that's why they're
having,
panicking so much.
well, I don't know, but they've become very visible fighting these very stupid fights. They're tilting against windmills, and maybe people are tired of replacing their lances.
Well, I'm not sure that that was not totally gender related, but will
Yeah,
it
I
fly?
wasn't
Ben.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie. I'm gonna have to go last.
Okay.
Okay.
The show The Diplomat on Netflix. Totally love it. What's her name? Carrie Russell. It's so good. I rewatched all of season 1 and then I watched season 2 because season 2's out. It's just really good.
Great. Oh my God. Why I'm such a loser. I don't know. I don't have anything.
Is
I don't.
it tennis again? Or
No, that's over. That competition ended. You
Wait,
know,
what's your USTA ranking?
my own personal.
Yeah.
Let's see. How many people are on the planet?
No. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, like 7 billion.
All
So
right.
I'm like number 6,999,000,000 trillion. Um, yeah, I don't know. I like you guys. I like our audience. I appreciate everyone.
I
Let's
love our
see.
comments.
Yeah, the comments are great. And we do have a newsletter now for paid subscribers. So because we do appreciate you and there is more things in the works, but I do put a lot I try to get something together that has you know, a lot of links and small summaries of news coverage, and then also some a little bit more reporting just to have it for people because I think it's helpful. So that's something. It is gender related, but it's what I got going on. I'm tired too, Eliza.
Thank you for doing all that, Ben.
No, I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you.
the opportunity because it's good. It's good for me. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks,
Have
everybody.
a lovely week.
Hi.
Bye, people.